Welcome to My Healing is Your Healing, a podcast for the woman who is ready to stop performing and reclaim her voice. I'm your host, Celeste, and around here, we don't do surface level. We go deep. Each week, we'll explore concepts like self-discovery, radical honesty, and the kind of healing that rewrites your story from the inside out. This is a space for truth-telling, for remembering who you are, and for coming home to yourself, louder, braver, and more radiant than ever. So come as you are, and let's do this together. Let's begin.
Welcome back to My Healing is Your Healing. I'm your host, Celeste, and today we're closing out our month of self-worth with a truth that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. Not because it's dramatic or explosive, but because it's so subtle. Because it slips in quietly, and because most women don't realize it's happening until they've been living inside of it for years. Most women don't walk around thinking, I'm unworthy. That would almost be easier to name. Instead, they just feel resigned, tired, and flat, like the sharp edges of life has been filed down without their consent. And they think, this is probably about as good as it gets, or that I shouldn't complain, or other people have it worse. And they're not furious, they're not hopeless, they're just not inspired enough to change anything. And the real resignation is the cost of low self-worth. Because the longer that you live telling yourself that you don't deserve more, the harder it becomes to even imagine that more was ever meant for you in the first place. And you stop dreaming not because you're pessimistic, but because dreaming starts to feel embarrassing or unrealistic, childish, like setting yourself up for disappointment. Low self-worth rarely announces itself loudly. It doesn't usually sound like self-hatred. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It sounds like, I'm fine. Guess this is just how life is. This is just who I am now. And from the outside, someone with low self-worth can look incredibly put together, responsible, capable, even successful. But from the inside, there's this quiet shrinking happening. And settling isn't this dramatic collapse, it's just a slow dimming of your internal light. You don't consciously give up on your dreams, you just keep postponing them. You tell yourself that you'll get to things when things calm down, when you have more time or when you're more confident, when life feels easier. And then one day you realize that you've been saying later for years. You say, I guess I just don't deserve love. You just date people who can't meet you. You don't say, I'm stuck. You just stop believing that effort would change anything. And eventually that resignation starts to feel normal, familiar, safe even. Low self-worth doesn't just affect how you feel about yourself. It shapes what you allow in your life too. You stay in relationships that drain you, whether they're romantic or platonic, because asking for more feels risky. You tell yourself that having something is better than not having anything. And you worry that if you speak up, you'll lose what you already have. And you don't fully realize that what you already have is costing you. You tolerate being talked down to, or dismissed, or minimally reciprocated. Not because you think that it's okay, but because you don't fully believe that you're entitled to better. And when you don't believe that you have worth, you quietly teach others how to treat you. You stay in jobs that underpay you or overwork you, telling yourself that you should be grateful just to be there. You downplay your skills, you minimize your contributions, and you convince yourself that wanting more is selfish or unrealistic, even though a part of you knows that you're capable of so much more. You surround yourself with friendships that stay on the surface because you haven't asked for depth. Not because you don't want that intimacy, but because you're afraid that if you show up honestly, people will leave. And sometimes they do. But the ones who leave you when you become more were never meant to meet you there anyways. And slowly, your dreams get pushed to someday, which quietly becomes never. Not because you don't want more, but because somewhere along the way you decided it wasn't meant for you. And this is the emotional cost of living below your worth. And it usually doesn't hurt out loud. It hurts chronically. It shows up as this consistent low-grade dissatisfaction. Like your life is technically full, but emotionally empty. Like you're doing all of the right things, you're checking all the boxes, and you're still feeling unmoved by your own days. There's this quiet resentment towards the people who seem to live freely, towards women who take up space without apology, towards yourself for not being able to choose differently, even though you don't fully know how to. And there's this dissociation where you numb out with food or alcohol or scrolling or sex or work, anything that takes the edge off of this truth that you don't want to sit with. Not because you're weak, but because being present in a life that feels misaligned can be painful. And then there's this loss of aliveness. You stop feeling excited about your calendar. You drag yourself through your evenings. Tomorrow doesn't feel interesting. And you can be surrounded by people, even talking directly to you, but still feel unseen. Because you're not fully showing up yourself to the world. And the world can't meet what it doesn't know exists. This is what low self-worth quietly steals from you. Not success or not survival, but possibility. So why do we normalize less than we want? Because it's not that we're lazy. It's not that we lack ambition or that we don't know better. We normalize less because we were trained to. Most of us grew up absorbing those same quiet rules. Don't be too much. Don't want too much. Don't ask for too much. Just be grateful. Be reasonable. Be realistic. And be easy to deal with. And somewhere along the way, gratitude got twisted into self-abandonment. We told ourselves, well, we shouldn't want more because what we already have is enough. Enough compared to someone else. Enough compared to what we were taught to expect. Enough compared to the version of ourselves who once survived something harder. But gratitude does not require you to silence your desires. Appreciation does not mean resignation. And having enough does not mean you stop listening to that part of you that wants to grow. We start fearing that wanting more makes us greedy or unrealistic or delusional. And we worry that if we name what we truly want, we'll sound ungrateful or dramatic or selfish. So instead of expanding our lives, we shrink to match what feels available. We don't stop wanting, we just stop admitting it. And that's when the belief quietly settles in. More is for other people, not people like me. People who are luckier, people who are braver, or who had better timing, better support, better circumstances. So we make our peace with what is, even when it doesn't fit us anymore. We've built a life that functions instead of a one that feels alive. But here's what happens when you truly believe you deserve more. Not in an entitled way, not in a demanding way either, but in a grounded, self-respecting way. Because these things begin to quietly shift. Things begin to shift quietly, but decisively. Your standards rise, not because you think you're better than anyone else, but because you're clearer about yourself. You know what drains you. You know what nourishes you. And you stop negotiating with your own needs to stay comfortable. Your choices sharpen. Decisions that once felt agonizing suddenly feel simpler. Not easier, but just cleaner. Because you're no longer arguing against your own intuition. And you stop convincing yourself to stay where you've already outgrown. Your energy returns. And this is one of the biggest tells. When you stop living in this quiet resignation, you start feeling alive again. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you're moving towards something instead of enduring what is. Your body returns. Your curiosity wakes up. Your calendar starts to feel like an invitation instead of a burden. Your life begins to expand. Not because luck suddenly favors you, not because the universe finally noticed you, but because you finally gave yourself permission to reach, to want more. And this is why I love Brianna Weiss's book, The Mountain Is You, so deeply. Because one of the core truths in that book is that you cannot comprehend the full scope of what is available for your life from the vantage point of your current limitations. So when you decide you're unworthy or you box yourself into a smaller existence, it's like telling life, I know better than you, giving it the middle finger. But the truth is, life is generous. So when you soften instead of constrict, when you trust instead of brace yourself, when you stop clinging to what's familiar and you allow yourself to want what's next, life responds. Opportunities appear. People shift. Doors open in ways that you could never have strategized your way into. Not because you forced them, but because you finally made room. So here's your toolbox item for this week. We're going to call it the gentle refusal. And today, I want you to ask yourself, what am I tolerating that my future self would gently refuse? Not angrily or dramatically or with a manifesto and a speech, but just like calmingly, lovingly, without apologizing. If it's not a fuck yes, it's a no. And just remember that that's not harsh. It is self-respect. So as we close this episode, I want you to remember this. You don't need permission to want more. Desire is not greed. It's data, it's information. It's about finally believing that the life that you want is allowed to move through you. When you stop telling yourself that you don't deserve more, the world begins responding differently. Not because you changed who you are, but because you finally chose yourself. And if you're ready to start choosing yourself, I would love to invite you into our women's group. We meet on the second and fourth Wednesdays of every month. It's online, it is free, and it's a space where you don't have to shrink to belong. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, keep showing up, keep growing, and remember, you were never meant to dim your light.
Thanks for tuning in and being here, for healing out loud, and for walking this path beside me. If this episode cracked something open or helped you remember a part of yourself, pass it on and share it with someone you love. For more support, free resources, or the next steps to your journey, head over to my website, myhealingisyourhealing.com. And if you loved today's conversation, subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your words help this space grow and help more women find their way home to themselves. If I was your muse today, then my healing is your healing. Until next time.